Hi, everybody. This is Shreya Gupta, and you're watching One World News. Today, with us, Kiran Bhat is here, who is a poet, writer, nomad, and I'll say somebody who has explored the world and identities and also the languages. So, my Kiran, first of all, I would like to welcome you on this conversation that we are going to happen on this Pride Month, especially when we
Thank you for having me.
take a pause and celebrate this month and celebrate people especially. So tell me about yourself first and tell me the books you write basically.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Kiran Bhat. I'm an Indian American novelist, poet, and polyglot. I've lived all over the world. I've traveled the world as well. I take advantage of this perspective to write fiction and poetry. And my work is usually always in different countries, different backgrounds, trying to make people question how they place themselves when they're reading a work of fiction or reading a work of poetry. And I'm always trying to challenge borders, and queerness is a part of my work as well. But I say queerness in the sense of I am LGBT, but also just being outside of the norm, being different, and purposefully choosing to make people think differently through my work rather than sticking to tradition.
So how did growing up between cultures shape your understanding of identity?
Well, being an Indian American growing up in the US South, but I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, which is a very different time than 2026. It was
Yeah.
also somewhat homophobic and difficult in the US South and Georgia, where I grew up at that time. Of course, it shaped me. I dealt with a lot of exclusion, a lot of discrimination, bullying, which everyone in the world in some form deals with, but it was very formative for me. I do think that there's a lot of difference in the queer discussions, however, it is 2026. And well, it's hard to say because Trump and the US administration is rollbacking a lot of LGBTQ rights, and unfortunately, the US is like a lighthouse to many countries who are starting to consider LGBT rights, and a lot of countries like India, which was starting, had decriminalized or re-decriminalized homosexuality in 2018, and was starting to get towards this idea of maybe considering same-sex rights and marriage and adoption, maybe.
Yeah.
Now there's nothing there. And we see, like, with the Cockroach Janta Party, there was this non-binary person who was really bullied and all this. And I
Yeah.
think you're starting to see a lot more people who are um, starting to adopt that Andrew Tate style or this Trumpian style of bullying LGBT people, which was not common here like a few years ago. So I think there's certainly influences for better, for worse. And the LGBT conversation, like all of our conversations, are global ones, and we're seeing a lot of drawbacks right now to LGBT rights and people's ability to speak and think freely. But I also think India is one of the countries that has potential to become a country with a decent amount of LGBT rights if things get going in the proper direction. And I think we just have to sit and stand our ground and try to do our best to make sure that people understand that it's just a difference, that some people eat with left hand, some people with right hand, some people like people of the same gender, some people like people of different gender, some people like to play cricket, some people like to go to museums. As long as you're not doing anything to harm anyone, then any divergence, I think, has its merits.
Okay, so you just said India has a potential to be the one country who have like best rights and freedom to choose your identity and all. But recently, India has like passed an act of transgender. Like some there's an act like related to transgender identity. What do you want to say on that? Like how
So
like
let me again clarify. I wasn't saying that India is going to. I said that India,
has
of the countries in the world, has potential. Yes, not that it is on the red track. Right now, it's on the opposite track, and the trans bill is one of these things. So just a few months ago, there was a bill that was passed in which basically people who are Kinnar, Hijra, and certain identities in India are allowed to call themselves trans. And basically anyone else has to get government permission to be identified as trans, which unfortunately removes the right to individual expression, to choosing one's choosing one's gender identity, which is a huge drawback. And unfortunately, there's not much anyone can do about it. Of course, it's nothing that I'm supporting, because individually, I mean, again, as long as you are choosing to do whatever is right for you and you are doing things in the context of your body, who's anyone to tell like, if you want to cut your hair short, if you want to cut your hair long, if you want to present yourself like a male, female, as long as you are doing it for yourself and you're not harming anyone or forcing like someone else to do anything, why does it have to matter? So it's unfortunately again it goes back to what I was saying earlier. A lot of people in India, I remember I was interviewed by this oddcast and they had even made this comment, oh, but in US, like, all the people now identify as unicorns and dogs and all this, they watch these videos and then they think, and even one of these uncles who had supported even gave this as evidence, like they watch these like videos out of context and assume because people in the US are like at these conventions, like these comic cons or whatever, are dressing like, reindeers or anime characters or whatever, like this, they're taking it into another direction. And so again, it's going back to like people are watching things on YouTube, people are watching things online, and then they're making these judgments and thoughts that these are horrible things for Hindustan and they should not be here, and then we have to control and restrict individual freedom and expression. But
But
yeah, it's
see, yeah, but if we trace back to history, it has always existed in some
yeah,
way, I guess. Like we have
definitely. And there's yeah,
references.
tell.
Yeah. So my next question to you is that you have lived in different parts of the world. How does queerness looks there and it is here in India?
Yeah. Let me make 2 points because one, I'll answer your previous question. I want to make another point about gender and sexuality, which is that gender and sexuality divergence is everywhere. It's in the animal kingdom as well. A lot of animals engage in homosexual behavior or trans behavior. It is as common in the animal kingdom as it is in the human kingdom, and humans have traversed the genders. And I mean, historically, we've always had people of different variations, but the patriarchal order was that no matter what your inclination was, you get married, you produce a child, and then you further on the line, whatever clan that name has. So I think people are now just saying, rather than living life in that way, I can make the choice to live outside of the idea of just meeting people for the sake of pursuing, a family hierarchy, a patriarchal line, and I'm choosing to adopt a love towards other individuals because I like them and they might be of the same gender, and I want to spend my time with them for the rest of my life. So those are basically the main arguments towards these sorts of movements. But homosexuality, heterosexuality, and all the different divergences of human sexuality and gender have existed in all the animal kingdom and through time immemorial.
Yeah.
Now, to answer your second question, it depends on the part of the world, which is why I said India has potential, because certain countries in the West, particularly in Latin America and Europe, are doing much better. The countries like the US are going through an up and down, which unfortunately are influencing a lot of the world. But you have Africa, you have the Middle East, you have a lot of parts of the Pacific, Caribbean, which is a very difficult place to be LGBT. And a lot of these places, like when the US went through is going through its fall into tyranny, that also caused a lot of anti-LGBT legislation to be passed in Pakistan, for example, where immediately like being gay or talking homosexual discourse was banned, like the Russian style. And now there are these bills in Senegal, Uganda, like actively banning any mention of homosexuality or the promotion of homosexuality. Luckily, those things have not come to India yet. We'll see. Knowing this government, it's hard to know. But it's really hard to know because it can happen out of nowhere as well. Which, like, the trans bill happened out of nowhere, really.
Yeah.
So, but before the trans bill, it was looking like India was becoming more positive towards LGBT, or at least not like giving it any negative attention, just letting us kind of live here and do our thing and live our lives. And then the argument was to get towards adoption, marriage, which is very important because, as you saw in the US and Europe, once these legal precedents create like the decriminalization of homosexuality, once a legal precedent is created, it creates more space for these communities to have more rights. And so having marriage rights, adoption rights help normalize the idea of homosexuality and allow for more people to have space.
I'll say, like, I just have a statement. Politics play a
Mm.
bigger role in this too, like how, particularly this community is gonna live and survive in the future. So, what is your opinion about like politics of India and politics of other countries too, in comparative? I know this is very different question that
Yeah, and it's hard to
talk
say. And
about.
I touched a little bit earlier because we're seeing a lot of far right movements spread thanks to the far right movements in the US. And we're seeing a lot of people get, like previously a few years ago, someone might have not liked something about LGBT, but they've just kept their mouth shut. Whereas now people say it
Yeah,
openly because
yeah.
this current global tendency is to make people feel like I might not like it. Previously, like I might not like it, but people have the right to their opinion. Whereas now people feel like justified to say I don't like it and really shout it and try to make it feel like it should not exist if you're a minority. So the politics in India is following a lot of the tendencies you're seeing in a lot of countries, in the US, Germany, France, a lot of Russia, Turkey, a lot of different countries. Again, before the transfer, there was a chance that it was like also Japan, Korea. There were certain countries that people were saying could have the chance to become more progressive, and India was one of them. Like what Nepal is doing now. Whether it will go in that direction remains to be seen. We'll have to just see. But right now, I think a lot of us are just trying to make sure that people are you see, as you know, India has a lot of problems as well. I mean, there's a lot of people who are just suffering to again, as long as you're not, and to make it clear, like, a little child, a boy in 15, 16 cannot consent. A dog or animal cannot consent, but two humans who happen to be of the same relative age and similar, background, can consent regardless of the gender. So
Yeah.
as long as you're not doing anything that harms other human beings, I mean, let people live in peace and let us all suffer in harmony.
And you know what? People are more concerned about like how somebody is with somebody else, yeah, how they are in their
Yeah.
own self. They're not concerned about
Yeah.
the actual things that are happening. Maybe they're
That
more.
are actually suffering. Yeah,
Yeah,
but that's also culturally in India, as you know, like people over many centuries, like, if you marry this jati, marry this background, this or that, like there's more concern about that than the amount of trash on the roads or the lack of, public services or health, education. So I mean, that has been a situation in India for many centuries now. I mean, and of course it would be good to make people generally want to move things in the direction, but people are distracted, people are happily distracted, and when people are happily distracted, then no one gets anything done.
I was asking like, what is your like? Do you guys have any hope from CJP? Like CJP is gonna do something related?
I'm very sad about CJP because one of their ministers is transphobic. Vijay Dahiya, he said this like, basically people like liberal gender people are like changing the gender and everything, and the official party has not said anything about LGBT. I
Yeah,
think
they didn't.
yeah, and Abhijit said one nice thing to that non-binary person who was bullied, like, this is what you. But it was also a little weird. It was a little bit
Yeah, I
like,
know.
this is what you get. This is what happens when you stick up for what's right. But it was also not like very sympathetic. It was not like, I'm sorry you had to deal with this. This really sucks. I wish we
I
could have
have seen
helped you.
that
It
comment
was a
of
little,
him. Yeah, I have seen.
yeah.
I just wanted to know like how you have started writing novels. Like how you
So
have.
I came to writing because I went through some trauma with my parents, and I had to turn to writing to become, to help myself basically, and emotionally. And then I turned to novel, like fiction writing, when I was a student at NYU, and I got a lot of support for my creative writing as a short story writer. And I went to Spain, and I had this kind of idea: I want to write all the world in a novel. I wanted to make one novel that had all the countries in the world in it, which I'll send you a link to later. It is a novel actually published on a website, and it takes place over a decade in 365 different places of the year, 365 places of the world over the course of 10 years, and I'll
Wow.
send you the link.
Wow, I would
But
love to read it for sure.
yeah, lovely, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
But the novel was, the first novel I published was We of the Forsaken World, which was the first novel I took towards the idea. It took about 10 years to write, and I was traveling the whole decade. Then I published it in 2020. So after I went from Spain, I decided to take jobs teaching English online. I just traveled. I went to Latin America, I went to Africa, I went to East Asia, and I spent every year in a different corner, and I just observed the people there, learned their languages, and tried to use that also to influence my own writing style and my own stories and create different styles of fiction through that.
Okay. So, like now, I just want to tell you this thing. I have many friends of mine who has not opened up yet. They just want to,
Hmm.
they're just trying to get the courage to tell people about themselves. Like they are very,
LGBT.
yeah, of course, yeah,
Huh.
LGBT. They are from the LGBT community. They support. They have been into college groups and all, but
Huh.
they're still having a fear. So, what do you
Yeah.
want to say about to these people if you have to say something to them?
See, there's so many backgrounds, Shreya, as you know, and at the end of the day, I cannot speak to most people. And people's family lives, mother tongue environments are so different, and it's hard to say one general thing. I mean, you have to be economically independent, first of all, because without economic independence, you cannot do anything in your life. You might have, I know a lot of Indians love to live with their family, but it's sometimes better. I was just telling someone today, like, it's better to live alone for some period in your time and live in even a different country, but at least alone, because you have to understand who you are, not like what your parents think you are, not what your society, not what your culture, what your community made you think you are, but who you really are, which means you have to observe yourself outside of the context you come from, and you have to just observe yourself as who you are. And so I think living alone and trying that for a few years and living your own life is fairly important, whether in another country, city, but even in another suburb, maybe. But generally speaking, you have to make that effort to find out who you are at the end of the day. And I think that to come out after you're economically independent, you have some leverage against your parents, meaning that they do not have any economic control against you, then it's easier to come out. I also think that people take time. Like my parents are still sort of working through it. They're much better, and becoming successful authors helped a lot. And they see me in society. I speak openly like this, and nothing has happened, and that is there. But at the end of the day, a lot of parents have this idea that their children will have grandchildren and will continue the lineage. And when we choose not to do that, it's. But I'll also say that there are a lot of ways that we fail and disappoint our parents. Like even people who remain cisgendered, and I have a cousin who is from Bangalore who is married but has chosen not to have children. So she also has a lot of issues. And then if you choose to have children, did you have them at 30, 40? Oh, if you had at 40, why so late? And all this and that. And how many children you have, then what they do, where they, I mean, you have to also eventually learn to give boundaries to your parents and say, this is really like, this is who I am, and I hope that you can learn to love me and we can have a good relationship despite me being different in ways that other kids are not. And I hope that we can still have a good relationship despite that. And if you can, we all have to learn to give those boundaries at some point. Otherwise, it becomes infinite. The ways that our parents will try to
At the
manage
end
us.
of the day. At the end of the day, they are also just a society. Like,
And they're
part of
humans, and they're
society.
humans. Everyone is a
Yeah.
human being at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know.
And
So what?
you have to take control of your life if you really want to survive in this world, and you just
I mean,
want yeah, yeah,
regardless of whether you believe in reincarnation or afterlife or whatever, we only
yeah.
experience really life in this particular state for a given period of time, and we're put in this state for a reason, and we have to think.
I have one last final question. You have told me
Fair.
your child, like parents and all. Tell me, how was your like childhood? How like was it easy or was
Uh,
it tough?
Complicated because, like, as an only child, I grew up in a somewhat different environment from where my parents are from. My parents had a lot of expectations, but I was a little bit absent minded in my own head, in my own world, and I did not connect with the people around me. I grew up at a time where life, like, say, in the US South, was about football and, like sports, and I was not one of those people, and not a lot of diversity of experiences of people around me, both culturally, racially, and also just in interests. But I managed, and I've become a very multifaceted human being at the age of 36. But childhood was a little isolating.
Yeah, I get it. Like, it happens. I am seeing people around me and I'm realizing, I can connect you with them sometimes in this sense, how
Yeah,
they
sure.
were like this. By the way,
Mhm.
thank you so much, Kiran, for telling me all of these things and enlightening me with lots of knowledge. I would really love to read your novel, and I would really like
Yeah,
people to
sure.
read that so that they also get get exposure and get just get opinions about the things and see how actually things are in reality. Thank you so much, Kiran, for joining us.
Essentially.
Yeah, thank you so
Thank you
much
for having me.
for joining us on this One World News, this special series that is going on this particularly LGBTQIA community. It was really, 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 I'm really, really grateful. You joined and you gave me a lots of knowledge. I hope people have also enjoyed it. And I hope we will also again do our meet with you and we'll talk about
Done.
different issues. Thank you,
Yes,
Kiran.
always open to it.